So, let me just start by asking how you got into being a clinical psychologist in the beginning. What brought you into it? What drove you to it?
So I actually started my psychology role as an educational psychologist and working with the local authority around improving outcomes. And I worked on a specialist team, which is working with particular areas of the community who were really struggling to achieve the outcomes that they wanted. And there were lots and lots, as there always is, lots and lots of services going in and support, kind of doing the same thing, having the same approach that's always existed to try and improve outcomes. And luckily enough, I was in a team that was given a kind of blank canvas, and I was able to step back and look at the problem, look at the whole, and realise that actually everyone was focusing on kind of the outcomes and pushing for better results. But actually no one was looking at what was going in. No one was looking at the people within that system and in terms of what they were coping with. And so I focused my work at a very different level, which is about looking after individuals, looking after people and making sure that they knew how to look after themselves and look after the people around them and so on. And so when I then started my own company, it made sense for me to carry on that approach, focusing on partly doing psychotherapy because I'd already achieved that training and was putting that into practice, but really by looking at society and looking at organisations within our communities to think how can they be more effective by looking after the people who fundamentally make them up.
Yeah, and so was that more to do with the makeup of these organisations and who was working for them, or rather going more granular into rather than sort of studying an outcome in a community, actually getting involved with individuals within the community and suggesting these are ways in which you can improve this outcome, looking at maybe the development stages of a child and the 1,000 days and things like that.
Yeah,
am I right in thinking that?
Everything. So I was lucky enough to, and that's what I absolutely love about my job, because I still hold this style of practice true to my heart now, where I will go in any level. So I will work with individuals. If individuals are struggling, I will educate people around what's going on for them. So it might be about what's going on in their brain, or if it's a member of their family, they don't know what's going on for their child, be about that. Mm-hmm. But also I'll be stepping back and looking at actually how are people operating as part of a team, or how's the organisation working, whatever that organisation is, whether that's a company, whether that's a school, whether that's a family centre, it doesn't matter what that organisation is. Do they have a clear sense of purpose? Is everyone on board with what that's about? Does everyone know their part to play? So it's really kind of from within the person to also being the big picture part of that bigger sort of system that they sit within. Mm-hmm.
So taking a more holistic approach than some of the impersonal top-down dichotomies that these services offer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. And I think that's for me is a big shift, because as a psychologist, I got incredibly frustrated with only with the traditional models, only being able to get involved with a problem when everyone else had a go at it, and when it was deemed significant and serious enough that it hadn't really resolved itself through any other means of support, then the psychologist was allowed to get involved. And I was like, that's just ridiculous. It's like we're kind of waiting for stuff to go down the river, and then we're fishing it out, rather than actually going to the top of the river and actually stopping stuff being thrown in the first place. So I wanted to get to the other end, and that's where I position myself now, which I'm really lucky to be able to do.
Well, I read a report by the Mental Health Commission a little while ago that was suggesting that this is a problem. This is an endemic problem across, whether it be in your sector or in in psychiatry and things like that, or even the whole MDT sort of structure is geared towards dealing with a crisis, basically, and rather than looking at the social determinants of what's actually going on here. And so my question, I suppose, is: do you feel that there is? I mean, you've named your company. It's time for a change. But do you feel that time is actually coming, or are you having to drag people kicking and screaming into the light?
You know what? There's been a real shift, and I think COVID has really accelerated that. So I've, at one point when I was working with my company, and I was determined to kind of convert people to to do what they needed to be doing. I was determined to get my message across that really we should be looking after people. And we get people right, we get business right. And there are some people, quite a few people, who are really resisting that. They were still thinking, well-being is that fluffy stuff that's kind of for the faint-hearted. And there's and then I actually decided to take a different tact and just work with companies who know that they would like to do something different, who know that perhaps they could be doing something better, or actually some companies who know that what they're doing is really, really good. They just want to check that it's kind of top notch for them. Mm-hmm. And there are so many companies in that kind of that field who are appreciative of my support, and actually you can then bring them on because they want to do better, they want to engage, they want to change something. And even if you've got one individual within that company, because everyone has an influence, if you've got one individual who's determined that things could be better, that's where I'll start working with them. So, but I think more and more people now, more companies are really waking up to the fact that they have to prioritise people. They have to prioritise their workforce in terms of meeting their needs. And if they're not, people are walking. And that's why we're seeing such issues around there being so many vacancies and so many people are resigning and demanding better things. So it's no longer about employees being satisfied at work or even engaged. It's about actually they're getting the right experience, because if they don't, they're not going to stick around.
Yeah, and I think that's where that's where the Great Resignation comes into play. I suppose. I've resisted the term, but I think it's a measurable phenomenon now.
Yes.
Have you found that the work that you do can stave off that sort of thing? I imagine you have.
Yeah. So companies who are really focusing now on the big picture and have kind of come out of the silo of thinking, well-being is about a minority group, is about something when people are struggling. Those people who are now looking at it more holistically are really realizing the benefits, and I think that's becoming more apparent. So the companies who I work with are the kinds of companies who, for example, were at a conference I recently attended in Reading. Lots and lots of amazing businesses there. I was lucky enough to be running some workshops with some people who are just really in this space, who are keen to learn, who are keen to do better for their people. And the keynote speech was given by someone who has a very significant role in this business community. And he was talking entirely about the Great Resignation and how we need to be doing things differently in order to keep the workforce happy and to keep them well, and for our companies to have a great reputation. And I think the tide's definitely turned in terms of people really now understanding that when we prioritise this, it makes a real difference on outcomes. So it's no longer kind of a bolt-on, it's a nice to have. It's fundamental. If we look after people and we understand what people need, what helps them thrive, what gets in the way of them being able to do their job, then it's the real basic stuff. It's not rocket science, but if we get it right, it makes all the difference to people being able to get the performance and the outcomes they want.
What do you think is going to be your biggest challenge over the next, say, year? Thinking about trying to move your agenda forward.
That's a good question. I think there's only one of, for me personally, on my business, is one of me. Mm-hmm. So my personal challenge at the moment is about keeping on top of the work that needs to be done, because there's a lot of stuff in this area now, and I deliberately I'm not developing a team around me. I collaborate with lots of really amazing people, but I don't want to start employing my own people, because what I do isn't off the shelf. It's not kind of, I can't go and teach someone to go and do the stuff I do, because it's part of who I am. That's my personal challenge. In terms of in this space right now, I think it's about helping companies pull together all the stuff they're doing into a strategy. So lots of companies have been kind of waking up to the fact that they need to be doing more around employee wellbeing, employee experience. There's lots of stuff around resilience and so on, which is a whole different subject about how people approach that. But it's all quite disjointed. And for me, it's about helping companies pull all that together, so joining the dots up under a strategy for the workforce. And my worry is that lots of companies now realise they need to do something, but they are reaching for the bolt-ons, and they're not really making this whole agenda integral to who they are as an organisation, as part of their identity. Mm-hmm. And that needs to happen as part of a bigger strategy. So I think that's going to be the next challenge. People are going to start waking up to this and thinking, yeah, we need to do more, but aren't necessarily going to pull it all together so that you've got a coordinated approach involving everybody across the organisation.
Mm-hmm. I think on that point, it's interesting because there will probably be a number of companies that reach for the bolt-ons and are satisfied with it.
Yes.
But I suppose the aggravating thing for someone in your position would be they've done half the work. They've done half the work and they've actually done some good work.
Yeah.
But if it was just lip service, fair enough, you can't engage with companies like that too much. But if it is a case of they've got 3 or 4 bolt-ons, that if they were to join them up and
exactly
benefit from it.
I think also it's about checking that companies understand what some of these terms mean. And again, there's no one set definition. So for each company, how that's interpreted will look different. What it looks like in practice will be different. And I think, going back to resilience, when, lots of companies will say, well, we tick the resilience box. We provide training, we provide workshops on how to make you more resilient. So I really don't like that approach because it kind of shirks the responsibility of the employer. It's like, well, actually, if we make our employees more resilient, we can throw more at them and it's going to stick. They can cope with more. And I would step back and say, I really don't like that. It's enabling employees to be resilient. So understanding for them what gets in the way of them feeling good and being able to do something about it. But actually, as an employer, as an organisation, you have responsibility for creating a culture where your people can thrive. And it's about nurturing them. Resilience comes from the system that you're in, the organisation that you're in. And it reflects very much what you're experiencing day to day. So actually, you can't pass on that responsibility to individuals. You've got to hold some of that, and you've got to look at how you're enabling people to be resilient. So it's really having those conversations, and people have that, I hadn't really thought about it like that moment. And then that's a really key turning point.
Yeah, I think to add to it as well, I think maybe you'll find this a challenge, maybe you won't, but there will probably be a number of companies that don't even have their mission statement or their values clear. Yeah. So rather than before they even address you, they've got to actually sit and think about how it is they're going to, write a mission statement, hold themselves to their own values and to their own strategy. And that needs to be completely succinct before they can even engage with an individual like you. And I wonder how many companies think that they can engage with you now, but then actually they've got 3-4 weeks of quite strenuous work to come to an agreement at the top level as to what they want and how they want to be perceived. And then it starts to, they'll face downward, and then they would engage with you. And has that happened?
Oh, yeah. So that's happened quite a lot recently. What typically happens is a company will contact me and they have an understanding what they think they need to do, what their problem is. And then we start talking, and then it becomes apparent that actually they don't really have a very clear vision statement. They aren't really clear what their values are. Maybe they don't know what they are, or maybe they're just so outdated, particularly with how things have changed so rapidly over the last number of years. So actually we've ended up parking what the company thought they might be wanting me to do and gone right back to basics. And I've helped them work together in terms of becoming more unified as a leadership team. So as a leadership team, what is it that you think your company's about? As a leadership team, what's your purpose of being here? What's your vision? What are your values? And we've done work around them identifying that, and then having working groups and going out across the company to make sure that we're getting the views of all the employees, because it's no good having something that just the leadership team aspires to and no one else. And then, once you become clear on what that is, what are the behaviours that are going to be demonstrating those values? So what is it we're looking for? What is it we're looking to recognise and to reward in our company? So are we recognising or rewarding the outcomes in terms of money, or are we rewarding and recognising the behaviours that are demonstrating the values that we think are really important. Because if you change, again, it's about changing the focus to what's going on day to day, what's going in. Because if we can get the behaviours right and they're truly modelling the values that we think are important to achieve our vision, then the outcomes are going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think, if you do your job very, very well, no matter which way you look at it, the revenue will come. I think.
Exactly.
But then that's maybe the kind of thing that an employee would say, I think. I think what's interesting about that is that there are obviously a number of companies out there that think they have an idea of what their values are, but then when you unpick them, that they're not so sure. It is interesting because I think that conversation was happening at its height maybe 5 or 7 years ago, and a lot of companies took it on board, and it was a bolt-on type thing. And I suppose the requirement for you is that you need to go back and check that whole conversation wasn't bolted on, and then you can begin your work.
And that's where it's about digging beneath the surface, and that's what I like doing. I always, I liken a lot of stuff to an iceberg. Whether it's about mental health and wellbeing, what we see in each other is just the tip of the iceberg. We don't know what's going on underneath, and I think that's the same in an organisation. And you might see something and think, oh, that's fine, they've got a vision statement, or they appear to have their values clear. But when you look beneath the waterline, really what's going on? Do people know what they are? Do they agree with them? Do they know what they look like? Are they recognised? Do they make a difference? And unless we start asking those questions and digging beneath the waterline, then we'll have no idea. And most companies have been in a place where they are happy. They don't like this, so we don't tick the boxes. Of course, we've got this stuff for real, but actually they don't check it out in terms of what difference it's actually making, whether it's making any difference.
Have you ever gone into a company that's asked for help and had to say, look, I've got nothing to add. You guys are doing fantastically well. Obviously, there's some work to be done here, here, and here. Yeah. But I actually don't think you guys need me. I wish you the best of luck. Does that happen, or is that unicorn territory?
No, I could think of a company quite recently who they were a company who asked me to go in to say, we think we're doing amazing things here, and we just want to check out that we aren't missing anything. And having spoken to the MD and spoken to some of her leadership team and had a walk around, spoken to some other people within the company, and just had lots of conversations, then I haven't had to do anything. They have been so, we've had lots of really good conversations, which those in itself trigger me to think differently. She's modelling really good practice, and I love hearing about good practice, and I will use that as a good model to share with other companies. And for the MD, just having the conversations just makes her more aware of what she's doing, how she's doing, why it's working, what she can do more of. And it just, so I'm not doing any paid work there, but we regularly have conversations. She knows she can always reach out to me and say, I'm not sure about this, what about that, or this is what I'm up to. And I will contact her if I want some, models of a good practice that I can share with people. I'm on the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce steering group for the Mental Wellbeing Charter, and we were putting together resources or case studies for a resource that was released last week. I went to this company because they're doing amazing things. And that's where it goes back to when companies really put this at the forefront of their agenda, it doesn't make just a difference to their bottom line. It doesn't make a difference just for their employees. It changes their reputation. They get talked about, they get highlighted as this is a great company to work for.
Mm-hmm. So my final question, I think, is have you got any tips for employees that are currently in an organization that feel like this whole conversation is either a non-starter or is an uphill battle? What tips have you got for them?
There are lots of people in that situation at the moment, and people tend to think in their companies in quite traditional ways. So actually, I need to go and speak, obviously, to my manager if I've got a problem. And if your manager isn't the person who's going to be very sympathetic, then they think their doors are closed. Whereas actually there are often people who are open to having those conversations, who are open to thinking about it a little bit more. It's about finding those people. And so if you're trying to voice something to your manager, for example, and they aren't really listening very with any empathy, then go and try it out with someone else, and don't give up. Just go and have conversations, because at some point is likely you'll find someone who that conversation, it just resonates. And it could be someone in HR, it could be someone in any aspect of that company. But having someone else on board gives you the confidence that actually, yeah, it would be good to do something. And if you've got a number of people who are thinking, we're really not happy about this particular aspect, we'd really like something to change, then as a collective, think, how can we put our kind of, what people tend to do is to moan a lot about it, is to rather than moan about stuff and think, I really don't like this, and leave, what can we try and do to raise awareness of what's getting in the way for us? Because the issue a lot of people have in companies is they don't understand, they don't really know what the issues are. They think everything's fine, and they don't realise that lots of people are struggling with X, Y, or Z. So unless they're made aware of that, but it's about making people aware in the right way. So rather than criticism, it's about saying, you know what, I could do my job a lot better if. And as soon as you start to use that language, it's like, well, you know, that's obvious that we need to start looking at what those barriers are. So it's looking at how to have those kind of conversations and trying to put it in a positive way, that actually this is the thing that's stopping me from feeling great at work or being able to do my best work. And actually, I really appreciate some help to be able to move some of those barriers. And often managers are not the right people. People found recently that managers consider themselves accidental. That means they haven't had the investment in terms of developing them in that role. So to have the knowledge, the confidence, the skills to be able to deal with people issues. It's a very big ask of managers then to know how to handle all the demands on them at the moment. So your manager might not be the right person. It's going to find someone else to have like an initial conversation with.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, I'm very, very glad to hear that there are people like you out there, if I must say. I think that Menlo Park are a little bit different in that we do get looked after, I think. You know, I really do feel it. There are conversations about engagement. There are surveys that go out relatively often about how engaged we are with our work and if there's anything they can do to improve it. And it's not just about a free coffee once a week, which incidentally we do have and thoroughly enjoy. But it's a case of, I think the conversations are being had, and shout out to my director Andrew if he watches the video for taking these things seriously and encouraging conversations like this.
Brilliant.
So I'll end the recording, I think, for the moment, and then we can have a quick chat.
Yeah, brilliant.
But, thanks very much.
Thank you.